Next up, let's talk about NBA opening night. NBA opening night is, outside of Christmas itself, one of the Christmases of the NBA. And the storylines entering opening night, there's a lot of really interesting ones, but there's three in particular that stand out. Number one is the Oklahoma City Thunder setting the tone in their first game as the reigning defending champions. Now they go up against former Oklahoma City Thunder, Kevin Durant, and a newly revamped Houston Rockets team, not necessarily from a roster perspective, but in terms of their championship hopes. This was a team that, despite finishing high in the Western Conference last season, kind of was just punching above their weight. This year they have real expectations. So the clash between the Thunder having to prove themselves as being able to continue on what was one of the best individual season runs we've seen, while the Houston Rockets have their first official test as a team that, for the first time post James Harden, have real championship aspirations. The Thunder enter this game and enter the season with Jay Williams on the shelf. Jalen Williams on the shelf is obviously going to hurt them offensively and it's going to hurt them defensively, but it's going to open up more opportunity for Chet Holmgren to be more aggressive as an offensive player, as a guy that already was one of the better two-way centers in the NBA last season. The chance for him to be able to have a real breakout year this season as a 20-10 guy that averages 2.5 blocks per game. There's a real opportunity for him now to have that, now that Jalen Williams is likely to miss the first handful of weeks of the season. They also obviously have, a lot of returners from that championship team in terms of what that means for their defense. Cason Wallace, Lugas Dort, Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein, right? All of these guys are coming back healthy, and unfortunately, Nikola Topic still will not make his NBA regular season debut due to some kind of testicular injury. Not going to get into that too much, just going to say pause. But nonetheless, they are still one of the deepest teams in basketball. And the Houston Rockets are also equally as deep, or at least maybe not on par from a depth perspective, but just as talented with the depth that they do have. So that should be a really interesting matchup. I think the expectations for both of these teams are deservedly high, and I think it's understandable that this was chosen as one of the first games of the NBA regular season, not only because, of course, the Thunder are the defending champs, but because these are two young teams, despite the age of Kevin Durant, two young teams that honestly could end up messing around and facing each other as early as the second round of the Western Conference playoffs this upcoming season. There's real truth to that. So getting our first glimpse of a potential Western Conference playoff showdown in game one is all not just good for ratings, but I think it's a good litmus test for what the Western Conference is going to look like, because these are going to be two of the powerhouses of the Western Conference, and seeing these two go at it to kick the year off, I think will be a tone setter, not just for these two teams, but I think it's going to let us know a lot about just how crazy this Western Conference is actually going to look. And speaking of that, the Warriors play the Lakers. Now, another missing piece in this game, in this game for opening night, LeBron James. LeBron James will miss the opening game, and I believe he's going to miss the first 2 to 3 weeks due to sciatica injury in his back, which means this whole game is going to be headlined by skinny Luka and Steph Curry. My second most interesting storyline is how in the world does the two-man game of Luka Dončić and DeAndre Ayton work? Two top 5 picks from the same draft class. Two talented players, granted on two totally different ends of the spectrum in terms of talent, because I think that, Luka Dončić is an MVP caliber player. DeAndre Ayton is probably a fringe top 15 to top 20 center in the NBA at best. If the two-man game between Luka Dončić and DeAndre Ayton works, this will be the most potent offense in the NBA. Truthfully, because the ball handling of Austin Reeves I believe a lot in Rui Hachimura as a third or fourth offensive option. When LeBron James comes back healthy, you now add that offensive IQ into the mix, paired with the fact that LeBron James is coming off of a career year shooting from beyond the arc last season. He shot 40% from beyond the arc while taking 6 to 7 3-point attempts per game, which is absurd. Not just because he's 40 plus, but because the three ball has always been his quote unquote biggest kryptonite. And at his advanced age, he had one of his best 3-point shooting seasons. So if he can continue that trend as a knockdown 3-point shooter next to Luka Dončić, who's better, well conditioned, and maybe more likely to play in transition, something that's always been a knock against Luka Dončić, even dating back to his time with the Dallas Mavericks. There was always the thought that Rick Carlisle didn't want to play up tempo basketball. And the reality was, we see that now with the Indiana Pacers. We've seen that the last 2 seasons with Tyrese Halliburton at the helm. It wasn't Rick Carlisle. It was the fact that Luka Dončić was not an up and down, spread the floor, operate in transition kind of player like he was first coming out of, Slovenia, first coming out of playing overseas. When he was first drafted, this was a guy that was very dangerous in the open court. He was a guy that played up tempo, and he was the precedent for guys like Deni Avdija as this wing type ball handler that could put pressure on the rim simply by being a dude who picked the ball up and off the rebound and pushed the ball in transition. And for some reason, after getting drafted, he just decided to slow down. And he's operated much more as a perimeter player operated more as a half court player on the perimeter. And I think that with the better conditioning, with athletes like Rui Hachimura, like DeAndre Ayton, like Jackson Hayes, even like Jarrett Vanderbilt back healthy, he has the opportunity now to kind of reignite that fire as a guy who can just simply get easy baskets in transition, or at least create easy offense for this team in transition. One of the biggest things that hurt the Los Angeles Lakers really the last 2 years, but even more particularly last year, I think, was the fact that because they were getting inconsistency from the center position, given the fact that Jackson Hayes was their most reliable option, it put them in a weird spot where offensively it was almost like playing 4-on-5. And in a sense, it really shut down the paint a ton because teams were able to get much more aggressive with them on the perimeter. It's one of the reasons why that Minnesota Timberwolves series was so lopsided. It was because players like Jalen McDaniels, players like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, even Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards were able to just be so much more physical on the perimeter because they didn't have to really worry about the lob threat, the rim running threat. Because not only did they have Rudy Gobert to man the paint, but also it's not like Jackson Hayes is doing anything besides rim running. DeAndre Ayton has the ability to be much more dangerous as a back-to-the-basket player. I think he also is athletic enough to be a guy that I think can finish around the basket when given real opportunity to get good post touches. And I think that similar to having Chris Paul in Phoenix, I think that Luka Dončić is easily the best player from a facilitating standpoint that DeAndre Ayton has ever played with. Luka Dončić may even be a more elite passer than Chris Paul. More particularly Chris Paul at that advanced age, right? So you get a passer like him. You get a passer like LeBron James, later on in the season. I think LeBron is set to come back in mid-November. You put DeAndre Ayton in a really interesting situation. I think that the two-man game of Luka Dončić and DeAndre Ayton, if Luka is able to get DeAndre Ayton like 8 easy points off of rim running, transition, and solid post touches, if he's able to get DeAndre Ayton 8 points off of facilitating those 3 things, I think DeAndre Ayton is going to average 16, 17 points and 10, 11 rebounds. Now, most would say, well, Jay, he just did that last season with the Portland Trailblazers. It's a lot different when you do that on the Portland Trailblazers as a team that's still trying to figure out themselves and as a team that has real center depth with Donovan Clingan, Robert Williams, and in this case now also having Yang Hansen now, right? So you're a double-double machine on a team that has a ton of depth at the center position and more particularly is still very youthful and nowhere near the championship contender status that the Lakers are supposed to be in. But I also think that if he's able to just get easy baskets and get into the flow of the game in ways that guys like Scoot Henderson were not able to get him into, because Scoot Henderson is not the same kind of facilitator that Luka Dončić is, I think that's also going to help him improve as a defender. And that's the biggest thing that the Los Angeles Lakers need. And that's honestly my third most important storyline going into this game is, what does DeAndre Ayton look like as a rim defender against a team like the Golden State Warriors that personally I think does not put a lot of pressure on the rim? Outside of Jimmy Butler, this Golden State Warriors team does not have players that get to the basket on a consistent basis, and more particularly do not draw fouls at a consistent rate. Before Golden State acquired Jimmy Butler, they were like a bottom 7 to bottom 10 team in the league in terms of free throw attempts per game. They acquired Jimmy Butler and automatically vaulted into the top 15. I believe it was even the top 12 in free throw attempts per game with that acquisition. Being able to protect the paint is going to be the biggest question for the Los Angeles Lakers this upcoming season, because they're a team defense. They do not have a lockdown defender. They do not have a Toumani Camara. They do not have, they do not have Alex Caruso. They don't have those kind of guys that can kind of just shut the water. They don't have Lucas Dort. They don't have those kind of guys that can just shut the water off, right? And I think that their team defense, and JJ Redick's even said that before, that they don't have that go-to guy that can just be placed on the best player on the perimeter. So that's going to mean that much more, especially in a game like this one against Steph Curry, who is one of the better paint touch finishers in the league when you're talking about not just around the basket, but has one of the best percentages in the NBA in terms of floater conversion rate. So this will be a really good test, because Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, Brandon Bajemski, these are going to be guys, Moses Moody to a lesser degree, these are going to be guys that are going to try to get paint touches. These are going to be guys that are going to try to generate mid-range opportunities, and these are going to be guys that are going to test DeAndre Ayton's ability, not only to guard around the basket, but to be able to guard in space. So DeAndre Ayton, both offensively and defensively, needs to show up. And I'm not talking about just in this game. I'm talking about if the Los Angeles Lakers want to be considered as a real championship contender. Mind you, this team just finished third in the Western Conference in the seeding last season. But if they want to be considered as real contenders, because they're kind of knocked down a peg by the fact that Minnesota series was so lopsided, it's going to hinge on the health of LeBron James, obviously. But then I think second and most importantly is the play of DeAndre Ayton in the middle. Because we already know Luka Dončić is an MVP caliber player. We already know that. He's probably going to finish top 3 to top 5 in MVP votes this year, if not win the whole dang thing. Now, he has competition with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Nikola Jokic. That's going to be tough. But I think Luka Dončić, if healthy, is going to finish top 5 in votes for MVP this upcoming year. We know that LeBron James, at age 40, is coming off, at age 40 plus, is coming off of making an All-NBA team. So we know what he's capable of. We know Austin Reeves is one of the best third options in the NBA. The question simply now is, do they have the defensive infrastructure in the middle with guys like Jared Vanderbilt, with guys like DeAndre Ayton, to be able to make them a competent enough defense to be able to stay in games? Because I'm going to tell a lot of Lakers fans now, you may have the talent up top to play effectively in a shootout game. But in the playoffs, as proven in that Minnesota Timberwolves series, if you can't guard, your ceiling in the Western Conference particularly is significantly lower if you're just an offensive-only driven team. You have to be able to guard in the Western Conference. And particularly, you have to be able to have a high-level defender at the center position, because think about a lot of the centers that are in the Western Conference. Nikola Jokic is in the West. Victor Wembanyama is in the West. Alperen Sengun is in the West. Like, it's pretty stacked out there at the center position. And DeAndre Ayton is going to be tasked with dealing with that, both in the regular season and in the postseason. His play is one of the most polarizing subjects of this upcoming season, because many believe that he has the ability now in a winning situation again to play up to that capability. Others believe that the sour taste of what he's been the last few seasons is a representation of just what he's going to be for the rest of his career, and that the Los Angeles Lakers are not going to get what they paid for in him. I think there's a happy medium somewhere in there, and I think even a happy medium would still be a high level upside for the Lakers, given the fact that, again, their starting center last year was Jackson Hayes. But you guys let me know in the comment section down below what you guys feel like are some of the biggest storylines going into opening night, and more particularly, what are some of your biggest storylines entering the NBA season? Because although these storylines are very much centered towards the first game of the season, I think all three of these storylines apply to the entirety of the NBA season for these teams. The Oklahoma City Thunder have to prove that they can be the first team in the last 7 years to go back to back. We've had a different champion every single year for the last half decade plus. The Houston Rockets have real championship aspirations this year after adding Kevin Durant, but they have to live up to that. Or can they live up to that? I guess is going to be the question all year. The Golden State Warriors with Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler as the second option. Is that enough to be a championship contender in this version of the Western Conference? It wasn't enough last year. Questions around that now that they honestly really don't look that much different from last season, and really only have one real way to improve the roster moving forward, and that's moving off of Jonathan Kuminga, which they can't even do until mid-January at the earliest. And then the Lakers, who their biggest question outside of LeBron James is DeAndre Ayton. All interesting questions for all four of these teams, and all storylines that I think are going to be important factors in whether or not these teams are able to be, real championship contenders out west this upcoming season.